Few figures in galactic history embody the complexity of the Force, like Count Dooku of Serenno. From Jedi Master to Sith Lord, from aristocrat to revolutionary, his journey would reshape the galaxy and help orchestrate the fall of the Republic he once served. Born into nobility but abandoned to the Jedi, trained by Master Yoda himself, Dooku's path from the light to darkness would leave a profound legacy on both the Jedi Order and the galaxy at large. His mastery of lightsaber combat, political cunning, and command of the dark side would make him one of the most formidable adversaries the Jedi had ever faced. But to understand how a respected Jedi Master became the architect of galactic civil war, we must return to where it all began, with a child given up by his noble family, whose destiny would be forever shaped by the cosmic force. How many of you know the true world of Count Dooku? Without further ado, let us start where it all began. The night that shaped galactic history began with a father's rejection. In the opulent halls of House Serenno, one of the galaxy's oldest noble families, the Count held his newborn son with growing disdain. The infant's unprecedented Force sensitivity threatened centuries of carefully maintained bloodlines and political alliances. Rather than celebrate his heir's extraordinary gift, the Count saw only the loss of a dynasty. Within days of his birth, young Dooku was secretly surrendered to the Jedi Order, his heritage and birthright seemingly cast aside forever. The Count's decision, made in a moment of aristocratic pride, would eventually spell doom for the very republic he sought to appease. The Serenno nobility viewed Force sensitivity as a disruption to their carefully planned political marriages and alliances. A Force-sensitive heir meant losing control over their dynasty's future to the Jedi Order, an outcome the Count found intolerable. His solution was swift and decisive. The child would be removed, the records altered, and House Serenno would maintain its grip on power. What the Count couldn't foresee was how this rejection would shape his son's destiny. The Jedi archives recorded Dooku's arrival like any other Force-sensitive child, but his power was anything but ordinary. The infant's midi-chlorian count ranked among the highest ever recorded, surpassing many sitting members of the Jedi Council. Even in these earliest days, destiny seemed to mark young Dooku for greatness. The abandonment left deeper scars than anyone realized. Though raised among the Jedi, Dooku never fully embraced their teachings about releasing attachment. The knowledge of his noble heritage and his father's rejection created a permanent barrier between him and his fellow initiates. While other younglings formed bonds and friendships, Dooku remained apart, nursing a growing sense of superiority that stemmed from his aristocratic bloodline. This early abandonment planted seeds that would later bloom into darkness. The painful truth of his father's choice became a foundational trauma, one that would later make him susceptible to the dark side's promises of power and control. In attempting to preserve his noble house's political influence, the Count of Serenno had inadvertently set in motion events that would one day bring the entire galaxy to its knees. Master Yoda himself sensed something extraordinary in young Dooku. The ancient Jedi took personal interest in the boy's training, recognizing potential that surpassed even the Order's highest expectations. Under Yoda's tutelage, Dooku mastered lightsaber combat and Force techniques with unprecedented speed, displaying a natural affinity for the Force that impressed even the most seasoned council members. Yet, even as his powers grew, so too did his sense of superiority. Where other Padawans struggled with basic Force techniques, Dooku was already exploring advanced applications. His natural talent bred an arrogance that even Yoda's wisdom couldn't temper. Training sessions became subtle battles of philosophy, with Dooku questioning traditional Jedi teachings and pushing boundaries that had stood for millennia. The relationship between master and apprentice grew increasingly complex. Yoda recognized Dooku's exceptional abilities, but saw dangerous pride taking root. The ancient master's attempts to teach humility often fell on deaf ears. Dooku viewed such lessons as attempts to restrict his potential rather than guide it. While other Padawans found comfort in Yoda's enigmatic teaching style, Dooku grew frustrated with what he perceived as intentional obscurity. Their training bond, though strong, was marked by an underlying tension. Dooku's intellectual approach to the Force clashed with Yoda's more intuitive teachings. Where Yoda spoke of patience and listening to the Force, Dooku sought to master and direct it. This fundamental disagreement in philosophy created a widening gap between them. Despite Yoda's best efforts, he couldn't prevent his promising student from developing a critical view of traditional Jedi wisdom. The disconnect between master and apprentice would have far-reaching consequences. Every lesson Dooku rejected, every traditional teaching he questioned, created space for darker philosophies to take root. Though neither master nor apprentice realized it at the time, their philosophical conflicts were laying groundwork for a future that would shake the galaxy to its core. Yoda would later reflect on these years with deep regret, recognizing the signs he had missed in his proud and gifted student. In the rigid world of Jedi training, Dooku's secret correspondence with his sister Genza provided a forbidden window to his true heritage. Their relationship, hidden from the watchful eyes of the Jedi Council, became his only genuine connection to the life he might have led. Through encrypted messages and rare clandestine meetings, Genza kept her brother informed of Sereno's politics, their family's machinations, and the nobility he had been denied. Genza shared Dooku's sharp intellect and political acumen, though not his Force sensitivity. Their exchanges went far beyond familial affection, developing into a sophisticated dialogue about power, governance, and the state of the galaxy. She provided detailed accounts of how their homeworld's aristocracy viewed the Republic's growing corruption, perspectives that would later shape Dooku's own political philosophies. These communications directly contradicted Jedi teachings about abandoning attachment to family. Yet Dooku maintained them, seeing in Genza not just a sister, but a valuable political ally. She became his eyes and ears within Sereno's court, keeping him informed of their father's decisions and the planet's shifting alliances. This intelligence network would prove invaluable when he eventually claimed his birthright. Their relationship deepened over the years, evolving beyond simple sibling bonds. Genza's influence helped Dooku maintain his aristocratic bearing even within the austere Jedi Temple. She reminded him constantly of his noble heritage, feeding an already growing sense of superiority over his fellow Jedi. Through her, he learned the intricacies of court politics and noble etiquette, skills that would serve him well in his later role as Separatist leader. The emotional impact of this connection cannot be understated. While the Jedi taught detachment, Genza represented everything the Order wanted him to forget: family, heritage, and power. Their bond became a constant reminder that he was not just another Jedi, but the heir to one of the galaxy's most prestigious houses. This persistent connection to his noble roots would eventually help pull him away from the Jedi path and toward a destiny that would reshape the galaxy. Dooku's growing mastery of the Force brought him into increasingly close contact with the Galactic Senate, where his idealistic vision of the Republic began to crumble. In chamber after chamber, he witnessed senators openly accepting bribes, trading votes for personal gain, and abandoning their constituents' needs for political advantage. The corruption he observed wasn't simply the work of a few corrupt individuals. It was systemic, reaching into every level of Republic governance. What troubled him even more than the corruption itself was the Jedi Order's response to it. The Council, despite their wisdom and power, seemed content to watch from their tower as the Republic rotted from within. When Dooku raised his concerns, he was met with platitudes about patience and the importance of maintaining political stability. The very institution he had served faithfully for decades appeared willfully blind to the galaxy's deteriorating state. His frustration grew with each mission. Dooku began seeing patterns in how the Senate manipulated the Jedi Order, using them as convenient peacekeepers while ignoring their counsel on crucial matters. The Order's subservience to what he increasingly viewed as a corrupt system contradicted everything he believed about the Jedi's role in the galaxy. They were becoming not guardians of peace and justice, but enforcers for a failing democracy. The situation came to a head during the Galidron crisis. Dooku watched as the Jedi were deceived into becoming unwitting pawns in a planetary governor's schemes. The needless bloodshed that followed, sanctioned by the Senate and accepted by the Jedi Council, confirmed his worst fears about the Order's direction. His reports about corruption and manipulation were filed away, marked for future consideration, while the Council maintained its traditional stance of non-interference. In private meditation chambers, Dooku began exploring alternative philosophies about the Force and governance. He studied ancient texts that questioned the Jedi's traditional relationship with the Republic, finding validation for his growing dissatisfaction. These meditations would later make him susceptible to Darth Sidious's influence, but at the time, they simply reinforced his belief that fundamental change was necessary. The Jedi Order, in his view, needed to either reform the Republic or separate from it entirely. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine peacekeeping mission to the Mid-Rim. A group of Jedi Knights dispatched on Senate intelligence that later proved deliberately falsified walked into a deadly ambush. The mission's true purpose wasn't peacekeeping, but eliminating a political rival of an influential senator. Those Jedi deaths weren't casualties of service, but sacrificial pawns in a political game. Dooku, investigating the incident against the Council's wishes, uncovered a web of corruption that stretched from local officials to the highest levels of the Senate. The evidence was irrefutable. Republic officials had knowingly sent Jedi to their deaths for political gain. When he presented his findings to the Council, their response was measured, diplomatic, and in Dooku's eyes, completely inadequate. The Council spoke of working within the system, of maintaining the delicate balance between the Order and the Senate. They advised patience, suggesting that time would reveal the proper course of action. For Dooku, this response represented everything wrong with the Order. The Jedi had become so entangled in political machinations that they couldn't even protect their own. His formal resignation from the Jedi Order sent shockwaves through the Temple. No member of the Jedi Council had left the Order in over a millennium. In his final address to the Council, Dooku spoke of systemic failure, of an Order so compromised by political considerations that it had lost sight of its true purpose. His words would prove prophetic, though not in the way anyone expected. The sight of Dooku's empty council seat became a silent reminder of growing discontent within the Order. Some younger Jedi secretly sympathized with his position, though few dared to speak openly. His departure marked more than the loss of a great Jedi Master. It signaled the beginning of a schism that would eventually tear the galaxy apart. Dooku's arrival at his ancestral home marked a calculated rebirth. The prodigal son returned not as a humble Jedi, but as the rightful heir to one of the galaxy's most powerful noble houses. The grand spires of Serenno's royal palace, which had witnessed his childhood abandonment, now welcomed home their new master. His father, aging and weakened by years of political intrigue, could only watch as his forgotten heir claimed his birthright. The transition of power was swift and absolute. Dooku's decades of Jedi training had given him not just mastery of the Force, but an understanding of power that transcended mere political authority. The nobility of Serenno, initially skeptical of this former Jedi, quickly learned to respect their new Count's commanding presence. His sister Genza's years of groundwork among the aristocracy proved invaluable, smoothing his path to leadership. With the vast wealth of House Serenno at his disposal, Dooku began transforming his residence into a center of political influence. The palace became a gathering place for discontented senators, corporate leaders, and planetary representatives who shared his vision of a galaxy free from Republic corruption. Behind the elegant facade of diplomatic receptions and cultural gatherings, a movement was taking shape. Dooku's position as Count gave him access to resources the Jedi never could have imagined. He established private communications networks, funded research into advanced military technology, and began building alliances with powerful corporate interests. His criticism of the Republic, now backed by noble authority and immense wealth, carried new weight in galactic politics. The former Jedi Master cultivated an image that blended aristocratic refinement with philosophical depth. His public speeches about Republic corruption and the need for reform resonated with populations across the galaxy. Few realized that these carefully crafted appearances were laying the groundwork for a movement that would shake the foundations of the Republic itself. Palpatine first approached Dooku in the halls of the Senate, where the former Jedi Master had come to voice his concerns about Republic corruption. Their initial conversations seemed innocent enough. Palpatine presented himself as a concerned public servant who shared Dooku's frustrations with bureaucratic stagnation. The Supreme Chancellor spoke of reforming the system, of bringing true justice to a failing democracy. These words resonated deeply with Dooku's own disillusioned worldview. What Dooku failed to recognize was the careful orchestration behind each meeting. Palpatine had studied his target for years, understanding how Dooku's aristocratic heritage and Jedi training created unique vulnerabilities. The Chancellor knew exactly which ideals to champion, which frustrations to validate. He painted a picture of a galaxy that could be reshaped through decisive action rather than endless Jedi deliberation. Their discussions grew increasingly focused on ancient Force philosophies. Palpatine revealed glimpses of Sith knowledge, presenting it as forgotten wisdom rather than forbidden darkness. He spoke of powers beyond Jedi understanding, abilities that could bring true order to the galaxy. Each revelation was carefully measured, drawing Dooku deeper into Sidious's web while maintaining the illusion of free choice. Serenno's vast libraries became the backdrop for Dooku's first steps toward darkness. Palpatine provided him with ancient Sith texts, presenting them as historical documents worthy of scholarly study. The former Jedi's intellectual curiosity overcame his initial reservations. What began as academic interest evolved into practical experimentation with dark side techniques. The power Dooku discovered there confirmed his growing belief that the Jedi had limited themselves unnecessarily. Sidious masterfully exploited Dooku's existing prejudices and frustrations. Every complaint about Jedi complacency was met with examples of Sith action. Every criticism of Republic corruption was paired with promises of reform through strength. The dark side's corrupting influence worked subtly, transforming Dooku's genuine desire for reform into a thirst for dominion. By the time he recognized the manipulation, Dooku was already too entangled in Sidious's grand design to break free. The death of Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo struck Dooku with unexpected force. His former apprentice, perhaps the only Jedi who truly understood his growing doubts about the Order, had fallen to a Sith blade. The Council's handling of the incident confirmed Dooku's worst fears about Jedi complacency. They acknowledged the return of the Sith, yet seemed content to react rather than act decisively. Qui-Gon's death represented more than personal loss. It symbolized everything Dooku had come to despise about the Jedi Order. His apprentice had warned the Council about growing darkness in the galaxy, had pushed against rigid Jedi doctrine, and had died while the Council remained safely distant on Coruscant. The official investigation felt perfunctory, more concerned with maintaining peace than pursuing truth. In his private quarters on Serenyo, Dooku spent long hours reviewing reports from Naboo. Each detail reinforced his conviction that the Jedi Order had failed not just his apprentice, but the entire galaxy. Qui-Gon's confrontation with Darth Maul proved the Sith had grown powerful, while the Jedi remained blind. The Order's subsequent focus on training young Anakin Skywalker, rather than hunting the remaining Sith Lord, seemed to prioritize prophecy over present danger. The loss hardened something in Dooku's spirit. Qui-Gon had represented hope for reform within the Jedi Order, a potential bridge between traditional wisdom and necessary change. With his death, Dooku lost faith in gradual reform. His conversations with Palpatine took on new urgency. If the Sith had evolved while the Jedi stagnated, perhaps the ancient enemies of the Order understood something fundamental about power and change that the Jedi had forgotten. The ritual that transformed Count Dooku into Darth Tyrannus took place in the hidden depths of Coruscant. Sidious had chosen the location carefully, a nexus of dark side energy beneath the very foundation of the Jedi Temple. The symbolism was not lost on Dooku as he knelt before his new master. Above, the Jedi continued their traditions, unaware that their former council member was embracing everything they stood against. Dooku's acceptance of the Sith mantle came with full awareness. Unlike many dark side acolytes, he approached his transformation with aristocratic precision. The name Tyrannus was chosen to reflect his conviction that terror and fear were necessary tools for galactic reform. His noble heritage and Jedi training allowed him to maintain a degree of composure even as dark side energy reshaped his connection to the Force. Sidious' first commands tested Dooku's commitment immediately. The newly christened Darth Tyrannus was tasked with contacting the Kaminoans to begin production of the clone army. This assignment revealed the scope of his master's plan, showing how years of preparation had laid the groundwork for the Republic's eventual transformation. Dooku approached the task with the same diplomatic skill he had shown as a Jedi, though now those talents served a darker purpose. The final remnants of Dooku's Jedi identity were methodically sealed away. His curved lightsaber hilt, once a symbol of his mastery of Form 2, became an elegant instrument of terror. The diplomatic skills honed over decades of Jedi service were repurposed to manipulate and deceive. Even his aristocratic bearing took on new significance, serving as a mask to conceal the darkness that now fueled his actions. Deep within the works, Coruscant's sprawling industrial district, Dooku's transformation into a true Sith Lord began in earnest. The abandoned factories and massive machinery provided perfect cover for the dark rituals and training sessions that would reshape the former Jedi Master. Darth Sidious chose this location for its strong dark side resonance and its practical isolation, ensuring their activities remained hidden from Jedi oversight. Training under Sidious proved far different from Yoda's patient instruction. Where the Jedi taught control and restraint, Sidious demanded Dooku embrace passion and fury. The former Jedi's decades of lightsaber expertise served as a foundation, but Sidious forced him to unlearn many ingrained habits. Form 2, Makashi, remained Dooku's preferred combat style, though now infused with dark side aggression rather than Jedi precision. Sidious's instruction focused heavily on Sith sorcery and ancient dark side techniques. Dooku's natural gift for Force lightning flourished under his new master's guidance. The power coursed through him more naturally than any Jedi ability, suggesting an innate affinity for the dark side that had always lurked beneath his aristocratic exterior. These sessions often left him physically drained, but spiritually transformed. The psychological aspects of Sith training proved equally demanding. Sidious systematically broke down Dooku's remaining Jedi mental barriers, replacing them with Sith philosophy. Hours were spent in meditation focusing on pain and rage, channeling these emotions into power. Dooku's political idealism gradually warped into a conviction that only through absolute control could the galaxy find order. His master encouraged this evolution, knowing it would serve their greater plans. Special attention was given to maintaining Dooku's public persona. Unlike many Sith apprentices, he needed to continue operating openly in galactic society. Sidious taught him techniques to mask his dark side presence, allowing him to stand before Jedi without revealing his true nature. This deception required perfect control, blending Sith power with his natural diplomatic abilities in a unique synthesis of darkness and sophistication. Dooku's cultivation of corporate allies showcased his mastery of both aristocratic diplomacy and Sith manipulation. His first target, the Trade Federation, still nursed wounds from their failed blockade of Naboo. Newt Gunray's embarrassment and fear proved fertile ground for Dooku's overtures. The Count promised not just protection from Republic prosecution, but a chance for revenge against a system that had humiliated them. The intergalactic banking clan required a more sophisticated approach. San Hill, chairman of the banking clan, responded to pure economic logic. Dooku presented detailed projections showing how a major conflict would create unprecedented opportunities for profit. Secret meetings in the financial district of Munalinst sealed an arrangement that would fund the coming war. The banking clan's economic might would become the backbone of the Separatist movement. The Techno-Union fell in line through a combination of technological promises and subtle threats. Wat Tambor's organization craved access to advanced military designs. Dooku offered them exclusive rights to develop new battle droid models, while quietly reminding them how vulnerable their current trade routes were to disruption. The partnership would revolutionize automated warfare across the galaxy. Each corporate alliance strengthened the others. The Trade Federation's shipping combined with banking clan finances and techno-union technology created a formidable power base. Dooku orchestrated meetings between corporate leaders, fostering a sense of shared purpose and mutual benefit. These gatherings, often held in his palace on Sereno, laid the groundwork for what would become the Separatist Council. The Commerce Guild and Corporate Alliance soon joined this growing coalition, drawn by the promise of freedom from Republic regulation. Dooku masterfully played on their grievances, presenting separation from the Republic as a path to unlimited profit. Behind closed doors, credits flowed, and agreements were signed that would transform these commercial powers into engines of war. Their combined industrial might would soon challenge the Republic's very existence. Dooku's transformation of scattered dissent into an organized separatist movement demonstrated his political genius. Operating from Sereno, he wove together corporate interests, disgruntled worlds, and idealistic reformers into a cohesive opposition force. His status as a former Jedi Master lent credibility to his criticism of the Republic, while his noble heritage opened doors among influential systems. The Confederacy of Independent Systems emerged from months of careful groundwork. Dooku established a shadow government structure before any public announcements. Regional governors were selected, military hierarchies defined, and economic frameworks created. This methodical preparation ensured the Confederacy could function as a legitimate government from its first day of existence. Strategic planning sessions on Raxus Secundus brought together key planetary leaders. Dooku presented evidence of Republic corruption while offering a vision of genuine independence. His experience with Jedi diplomacy proved invaluable, allowing him to mediate between competing interests and forge lasting alliances. The promise of corporate support and military protection convinced many wavering systems to commit to the cause. The Confederacy's power structure reflected Dooku's aristocratic beliefs. He established a parliament on Raxus to maintain the appearance of democracy, while real authority remained concentrated in the Separatist Council. This arrangement satisfied both idealistic members who demanded representation and corporate allies who required direct influence. Dooku positioned himself above these competing factions as head of state. Building the Separatist military consumed massive resources. Dooku leveraged Trade Federation production facilities and techno-union expertise to create vast droid armies. These forces were strategically positioned across Confederate space, ready to defend member worlds or launch offensive operations. The military buildup occurred under the guise of legitimate security concerns, though its true scale remained hidden from Republic intelligence. The Parliament building on Raxus provided a grand stage for the Confederacy's formal declaration of existence. Dooku chose this moment carefully, waiting until his coalition had gathered enough strength to withstand the Republic's inevitable response. The assembled audience represented thousands of star systems, corporate interests, and political movements, all united under the Separatist banner. Dooku's address masterfully blended idealism with calculated rhetoric. He spoke of Republic corruption not as mere political failure, but as systematic betrayal. His words painted a picture of a government that had abandoned its founding principles, serving wealthy core world interests while ignoring the suffering of the Outer Rim. Each accusation was supported by detailed evidence, much of it gathered during his years as a Jedi Master. The speech directly challenged the Jedi Order's role in perpetuating Republic dominance. Dooku described his former colleagues as willing enforcers of a corrupt system, their noble intentions twisted to serve political ends. His status as a former council member gave these criticisms particular weight. Many in the audience had witnessed firsthand how the Republic used Jedi intervention to maintain control over distant worlds. Strategic cameras broadcast the address across the galaxy. Dooku's commanding presence and eloquent delivery resonated with populations far beyond Separatist space. His promise of a new political order, free from corruption and bureaucratic paralysis, sparked independence movements on hundreds of worlds. The address transformed the Separatist cause from a fringe movement into a legitimate alternative to Republic rule. The conclusion of his speech marked the Confederacy's official founding. Dooku signed the Articles of Secession before the assembled delegates, formally withdrawing member systems from Republic authority. This act of defiance, transmitted live across the HoloNet, served as both political declaration and call to arms. The galaxy now faced its greatest crisis since the formation of the Republic itself. Dooku's campaign to sway neutral systems demonstrated his mastery of political manipulation. While the Republic focused on maintaining existing alliances, the Count launched sophisticated operations targeting unaligned worlds. Each approach was carefully tailored to the target system's specific grievances and ambitions, creating a web of influence that extended far beyond Confederate borders. The Mandalore strategy exemplified his nuanced approach. Rather than pressuring the traditionally neutral system to join openly, Dooku supported Death Watch's insurgency through hidden channels. This indirect method allowed him to destabilize a strategic region while maintaining the Confederacy's diplomatic credibility. Similar operations across the Outer Rim created chaos that undermined Republic authority without requiring direct military intervention. Economic incentives formed the backbone of his neutral systems strategy. The banking clan offered favorable trade terms to worlds that maintained neutrality, while the Trade Federation selectively adjusted shipping rates to reward cooperative systems. These economic pressures proved particularly effective in the Mid-Rim, where many worlds depended on trade routes controlled by Separatist-aligned corporations. Dooku established elaborate intelligence networks throughout neutral space. Confederate agents gathered information about local politics while identifying potential allies and pressure points. This intelligence allowed him to anticipate Republic diplomatic initiatives and counter them before they gained traction. Many neutral worlds found themselves caught in a complex game of leverage and influence, their independence increasingly theoretical. The strategy extended to cultural manipulation as well. Confederate propaganda highlighted how neutral worlds prospered by avoiding Republic entanglements. Dooku sponsored artists and journalists who portrayed neutrality as a principled stance rather than political cowardice. This narrative proved particularly effective on worlds with strong traditions of independence, creating a philosophical framework that justified their refusal to support the Republic. Behind the refined facade of Confederate diplomacy, Dooku orchestrated a network of assassins, bounty hunters, and mercenaries to shape galactic events. Jango Fett became his most valuable operative, undertaking missions that required both lethal efficiency and complete deniability. The Mandalorian's attempted assassination of Senator Amidala exemplified how Dooku used targeted violence to advance political goals while maintaining a veneer of respectability. The criminal underworld proved surprisingly receptive to Confederate overtures. Dooku's aristocratic demeanor belied his willingness to work with organizations like the Pike Syndicate and Black Sun. These alliances provided both intelligence and operational capabilities beyond standard military resources. Criminal networks could apply pressure or eliminate obstacles in ways that could never be traced back to the Separatist leadership. Dooku's masterstroke in shadow diplomacy was his manipulation of the clone army's creation. While publicly denouncing Republic militarization, he secretly guided the Kaminoans' cloning program through his agent Tyrannus. This double game ensured that both sides of the coming conflict would field armies according to Sidious's grand design. The galaxy's fate was being shaped by invisible hands, with few understanding the true scope of the deception. The deployment of dark acolytes added another layer to his shadow operations. Former Jedi like Asajj Ventress carried out missions too sensitive for conventional agents. These Force-sensitive operatives could eliminate targets, gather intelligence, and disrupt Republic operations while spreading fear of growing Separatist power. Their actions also served to distract the Jedi Order from investigating deeper conspiracies. Special attention was paid to maintaining plausible deniability. Dooku established multiple layers of intermediaries between himself and his operative network. Orders were transmitted through encrypted channels, payments routed through shell corporations, and evidence systematically eliminated. This careful compartmentalization ensured that even if individual operations were exposed, they could never be definitively linked to Confederate leadership. As Supreme Commander of the Separatist military, Dooku wielded the largest droid army the galaxy had ever seen. His combat experience as a Jedi Master informed his strategic decisions, while his Sith training provided the ruthlessness necessary for total war. From his command center on Raxus, he orchestrated massive military operations across thousands of star systems, demonstrating a tactical brilliance that challenged even the most seasoned Republic generals. General Grievous served as Dooku's military enforcer, transforming strategic directives into battlefield victories. The Count personally oversaw Grievous's training, recognizing that the cyborg general's savage combat style perfectly complemented his own elegant approach to warfare. Together, they developed the Separatist military hierarchy, with organic commanders controlling vast droid armies through centralized command and control systems. The Separatist military structure reflected Dooku's preference for efficiency over democracy. Corporate armies were integrated into a unified command structure, though major contributors like the Trade Federation maintained some autonomy over their forces. This arrangement balanced military necessity with political reality, keeping powerful corporate allies satisfied while ensuring coordinated military action. Dooku's military strategy emphasized overwhelming force and psychological impact. Massive droid armies would descend on target worlds, their numbers demoralizing defenders before combat began. He understood that victory required not just defeating Republic forces, but breaking planetary populations' will to resist. This approach proved particularly effective in the Outer Rim, where many worlds surrendered rather than face inevitable destruction. His position as Supreme Commander served another purpose within Sidious's grand plan. Every military decision, every battle plan was designed to prolong the conflict while maintaining its delicate balance. Dooku ensured the war remained costly enough to justify increasing executive power, but never so decisive that either side could achieve total victory. The Confederate military machine existed not to win the war, but to transform the Republic into an empire. Form 2 Makashi crystallized as a response to the proliferation of lightsaber-wielding opponents in the galaxy. Dooku's mastery of this elegant combat form stemmed from his recognition that the wild, aggressive sweeps of Form 1 had become outdated. Where other Jedi focused on deflecting blaster bolts, Dooku perfected the precise footwork and blade control that marked a true Makashi master. The form's emphasis on economy of motion perfectly suited Dooku's temperament. Each strike in Makashi requires minimal energy while achieving maximum effect. Dooku's mastery manifested in his characteristic one-handed grip, allowing him to execute precise thrusts and parries while maintaining a nobleman's posture. His blade work focused on the wrist's strength and flexibility rather than the sweeping arm movements common to other forms. Makashi's technical demands shaped Dooku's entire approach to combat. The form required perfect precision in every movement, from the positioning of the feet to the angle of the blade. This precision proved devastating against other lightsaber users, as Makashi was specifically designed to create and exploit the smallest openings in an opponent's defense. Dooku's mastery allowed him to turn even defensive moves into potential attacks, making every parry an opportunity for a lethal riposte. In preparing for lightsaber combat, Dooku devoted countless hours to perfecting the form's signature techniques. The precise blade manipulation of Makashi allowed him to control the width and intensity of blade contact, letting him dominate the flow of combat through superior technique rather than raw strength. This mastery manifested in his ability to maintain a confident, almost casual demeanor during intense duels, his economy of movement making even the most challenging combat appear effortless. The distinctive curve of Dooku's lightsaber hilt emerged from ancient Makashi traditions, designed specifically to facilitate the precise movements and elegant blade work of Form 2. Its architecture granted superior control over the blade's angle and positioning, allowing for the minute adjustments essential to Makashi's fencing-like style. The curved design enabled Dooku to execute complex maneuvers with minimal wrist movement, maximizing his combat effectiveness while maintaining his characteristically refined posture. Dooku crafted his signature weapon with meticulous attention to ergonomic detail. The hilt's gentle curve complemented the natural arc of his arm movement, reducing strain during extended duels. He incorporated electrum and rare alloys into its construction, reflecting both his noble heritage and his status as a master duelist. The internal engineering matched the exterior elegance, with precisely calibrated focusing crystals aligned to produce a blade optimized for the controlled, precise strikes of Makashi. The weapon's distinctive geometry proved particularly effective in blade-to-blade combat. The curved hilt altered the angle of blade contact during parries and ripostes, creating unexpected vectors of attack that could bypass conventional defenses. This mechanical advantage, combined with Dooku's masterful technique, allowed him to disarm opponents through subtle manipulations of blade contact rather than brute force. The unique construction also facilitated the swift transitions between defensive and offensive positions that characterized high-level Makashi dueling. The curved hilt became synonymous with Dooku's mastery, inspiring similar designs among his dark side acolytes. Asajj Ventress notably adopted curved hilts for her dual lightsabers, though few could match the precision engineering of Dooku's original design. The weapon represented the perfect synthesis of Form 2's principles: elegance, control, and lethal efficiency. Even after his fall to the dark side, the aristocratic refinement of his lightsaber stood in stark contrast to the brutal efficiency typical of Sith weaponry. Fun fact: Christopher Lee was one of the few Star Wars actors with legitimate sword-fighting expertise, having trained in fencing since his early years in the Royal Air Force during World War II. His expertise directly shaped Dooku's fighting style. Christopher Lee's extensive fencing background profoundly influenced Dooku's combat choreography in the prequel trilogy. The actor's competition experience translated into Dooku's upright stance, precise footwork, and economical blade movements. Every duel sequence captured Lee's deep understanding of distance control and timing, core principles that seamlessly became part of Star Wars canon. The integration of classical fencing techniques set Dooku's fighting style apart from other Force users. His stance maintained the traditional fencing principle of presenting the smallest possible target, with his sword arm extended and body turned sideways. This technical foundation appeared prominently in his confrontations on Geonosis, where his measured retreats and advances demonstrated textbook fencing footwork. Lee's influence extended into the psychological aspects of dueling. Dooku's characteristic combat taunts reflected the mental warfare common in competitive fencing. His ability to maintain conversation while dueling emphasized his complete mastery over technique, particularly evident during his duel with Yoda, where his aristocratic bearing remained unshaken even when faced with his former master's acrobatic style. Dooku's mastery of Force lightning distinguished him among dark side practitioners, demonstrating a level of control that reflected his Jedi training. Unlike the raw, often uncontrolled bursts employed by other Sith, Dooku's lightning manifestations showed precise modulation in both intensity and duration. This refinement allowed him to use the ability for interrogation and torture without risking immediate death, a technique he employed effectively during the Clone Wars. Beyond lightning, Dooku's telekinetic prowess reflected decades of Jedi mastery, refined through dark side power. His Force grip demonstrated surgical precision, allowing him to manipulate multiple objects or opponents simultaneously while maintaining his characteristic composure. During the Battle of Geonosis, he displayed this control by simultaneously engaging in lightsaber combat while manipulating massive stone columns to attack Obi-Wan Kenobi. Dooku developed a unique application of Force push that reflected his dueling philosophy. Rather than overwhelming opponents with raw power, he employed precisely calibrated telekinetic bursts to disrupt enemy footwork and create openings for his Makashi strikes. This technique proved particularly effective against Jedi opponents whose traditional defense patterns weren't prepared for such subtle applications of Force power. The Count's mastery extended to more esoteric abilities, including Force choke and various methods of mental domination. Unlike Vader's brutal applications of Force choke, Dooku's version emphasized control and precision, often used as much for psychological impact as physical damage. His talent for mental manipulation manifested in subtle ways, allowing him to cloud the judgment of even experienced Jedi while maintaining his aristocratic facade. Dooku's pursuit of ancient Sith knowledge transformed Sereno's vast libraries into repositories of forbidden wisdom. The Count meticulously collected texts and holocrons from across the galaxy, focusing particularly on pre-Rushusan Reformation artifacts that detailed more nuanced applications of dark side power. His noble status and former position as a Jedi Master granted him access to collections and archives typically closed to outsiders, allowing him to amass extensive knowledge of forgotten Sith techniques. Within his private study, Dooku spent countless hours translating ancient Sith texts, paying particular attention to manuscripts describing the manipulation of midichlorians. These studies went beyond mere academic interest, as he sought to understand how ancient Sith managed to extend their influence over life itself. His research into these forbidden techniques complemented Darth Plagueis' earlier work, though Dooku focused more on combat applications than his predecessor's experiments with immortality. The Count's investigations extended to artifacts from various dark side traditions beyond the Sith. He studied Night Sister magics, ancient Korriban burial practices, and even collected data about the mysterious Force-wielding prophets of the dark side. This comprehensive approach to dark side knowledge reflected his scholarly background, treating different dark side traditions as complementary rather than competing philosophies. Dooku's understanding of ancient Sith alchemy set him apart from other dark side practitioners of his era. While he never fully embraced the physical transformations common to ancient Sith, he understood the principles behind them. The knowledge allowed him to recognize and counter various dark side techniques that might otherwise have surprised him, particularly useful during his encounters with Mother Talzin and her Night Sisters. Dooku's approach to training dark side acolytes reflected his own aristocratic nature and Jedi background. With Asajj Ventress, he established a rigorous training regimen that differed markedly from traditional Sith methods. Rather than relying solely on pain and fear, Dooku emphasized technique and precision, treating dark side power as a tool to be mastered rather than a force to be unleashed blindly. His instruction combined elements of formal Jedi training with Sith philosophy, creating a unique hybrid approach. In the combat arena of Serenyo, Dooku subjected Ventress to intense lightsaber drills that emphasized form over raw aggression. He recognized her natural talent for Jarkai dual-blade combat and refined it with elements of his own Makashi expertise. Unlike traditional Sith training, which often focused on breaking an apprentice's will, Dooku's method sought to channel his students' existing strengths while gradually introducing dark side techniques. The Count's training philosophy extended beyond physical combat. He taught his acolytes to maintain composure and dignity, even while wielding dark side powers, reflecting his belief that true power lay in control rather than unbridled emotion. This approach sometimes put him at odds with Darth Sidious's more traditional Sith methods, but Dooku maintained that sophisticated application of the dark side would prove more effective than mere brutality. Dooku's instruction included extensive study of political manipulation and strategic thinking. He trained Ventress not only as an assassin, but as a potential leader, teaching her the subtle arts of manipulation and control that had served him so well. This comprehensive approach to training produced dark side adepts who could operate effectively in both shadowy combat and diplomatic circles, though it also sometimes led to tensions with students who expected more traditional Sith instruction. Dooku's exploration of Sith rituals went far beyond theoretical study, delving into ceremonies forgotten since the Old Republic. Within the depths of his castle on Serenyo, he established chambers specifically designed for dark side rituals, their architecture incorporating ancient Sith geometric principles to enhance Force resonance. These spaces served as focal points for ceremonies that expanded his power while maintaining his characteristic control and precision. The Count's ritual expertise focused particularly on ceremonies of mental domination and foresight. Unlike the brute force approach of many dark side practitioners, Dooku refined ancient rituals to require less raw power while achieving greater effect. He adapted old Sith meditation techniques, combining them with his knowledge of Jedi practices to create methods that enhanced his combat precognition without requiring complete dark side immersion. His studies of Sith alchemy led him to rediscover rituals for imbuing objects with dark side energy. While he never fully embraced the physical corruption common to ancient Sith lords, Dooku mastered more subtle applications of these techniques. He could charge artifacts with dark side power while maintaining their ordinary appearance, creating tools that could influence others without revealing their true nature. Dooku's ritual work demonstrated unique refinement in blood magic ceremonies, though he approached them with scholarly detachment rather than savage enthusiasm. He understood the principles behind Sith sacrificial rites, but modified them to require less barbaric implementations. This methodology reflected his belief that the dark side could be wielded with sophistication rather than mere brutality, setting him apart from both ancient Sith traditions and contemporary dark side users. The Battle of Geonosis marked Dooku's first public revelation as a Sith Lord, culminating in a legendary duel within the planet's hangar complex. After overseeing the execution attempt on Kenobi, Skywalker, and Amidala in the Petranaki arena, Dooku retreated to a private hangar where he would demonstrate the full extent of his combat mastery. The confrontation began with Obi-Wan and Anakin attempting a coordinated assault, a strategy Dooku had anticipated and prepared for extensively. Dooku's mastery of Form 2 Makashi proved devastating against the younger Jedi's aggressive styles. He methodically dismantled their coordination, using precise blade work to separate the two and exploit their individual weaknesses. Against Obi-Wan's defensive Soresu, Dooku employed subtle blade manipulations to create openings, eventually overwhelming him with a precise strike. Anakin's raw power and use of Form 5 aggression proved equally ineffective against Dooku's economy of movement, leading to the young Jedi's humbling defeat and the loss of his arm. The arrival of Master Yoda forced Dooku to demonstrate his full dark side capabilities. Their confrontation showcased the Count's mastery of Force lightning and telekinesis, though even these proved insufficient against his former master. The duel culminated in Dooku's strategic retreat, having successfully demonstrated both his power and his tactical wisdom in knowing when to withdraw. This battle served multiple strategic purposes beyond the immediate confrontation. It established Dooku's credentials as a military leader, demonstrated the Confederacy's military capabilities, and perhaps most importantly, planted seeds of darkness in young Skywalker through his defeat and maiming. The encounter also revealed the full scope of Dooku's abilities to the Jedi Council, forcing them to confront the reality that one of their former masters had not only fallen to the dark side, but achieved significant power. The Florum confrontation showcased Dooku's tactical brilliance even when stripped of conventional advantages. Initially captured alongside Kenobi and Skywalker by Hondo Ohnaka's pirates, Dooku maintained his aristocratic composure throughout the ordeal. The pirates' initial success in capturing 3 of the galaxy's most powerful Force users came from their unexpectedly practical approach, using spiked drinks to incapacitate their targets rather than engaging them directly. During their captivity, Dooku's interactions with his Jedi companions revealed complex layers of their relationship. Despite their adversarial status, he maintained civil discourse with Kenobi, even cooperating when circumstances required it. This forced alliance demonstrated Dooku's pragmatic approach to survival, temporarily setting aside ideological differences while never truly lowering his guard. His refined manners remained intact even in captivity, creating a striking contrast with their rugged surroundings. The escape attempt showcased Dooku's combat prowess even without his lightsaber. When the opportunity arose, he demonstrated mastery of hand-to-hand combat and force techniques that didn't require obvious gestures or movements. His ability to maintain effectiveness while bound proved particularly impressive, using subtle applications of the Force to overcome obstacles and defenders alike. The Count's escape utilized a combination of physical prowess and Force-enhanced abilities that reminded his captors why he commanded such respect and fear across the galaxy. The aftermath of the Florum incident reinforced Dooku's reputation for both capability and vengeance. Once free, he orchestrated precise retaliation against Onaka's gang, demonstrating why crossing the leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems carried severe consequences. However, his response also showed calculated restraint, targeting the pirates' operations rather than seeking their complete destruction, proving that even his revenge followed careful strategic consideration. The Zygerian crisis revealed the full measure of Count Dooku's transformation from Jedi Master to Sith Lord. What began as a calculated military alliance with the Zygerian Queen Mirage Scintil evolved into a stark demonstration of Sith philosophy in action. Dooku viewed the re-establishment of the Zygerian slave empire as more than a simple power play. It represented an opportunity to demonstrate the Republic's weakness and the Jedi's inability to protect the very beings they claimed to serve. Within the opulent halls of the Zygerian palace, Dooku moved with characteristic aristocratic grace, yet his actions carried a newfound brutality. When Queen Mirage began showing compassion toward Obi-Wan Kenobi, Dooku saw not just defiance, but a threat to the larger Separatist agenda. His response was swift and merciless. Through the Force, he ended her life, demonstrating to all present that the age of compromise had ended. This execution served multiple purposes. It eliminated a wavering ally, installed a more compliant leader, and sent a clear message about the price of defying Separatist interests. The slave processing facility on Kadavo became a testament to Dooku's evolving methods. He authorized its construction not merely as a center of slavery, but as a sophisticated tool of psychological warfare. The facility's design specifically targeted Jedi weaknesses, forcing them to witness suffering they could not prevent. Each level of the facility represented a carefully calculated affront to Jedi teachings about compassion and protection of the innocent. Most revealing was Dooku's interaction with Keeper Agrus, whom he had personally selected to oversee the facility. Their communications demonstrated Dooku's mastery of manipulation, as he encouraged Agrus's sadistic tendencies while maintaining the appearance of refined leadership. When Republic forces eventually launched their rescue operation, Dooku's orders were explicit: destroy the facility and all slaves rather than allow them to be freed. The command reflected his complete abandonment of Jedi principles regarding the sanctity of life. The entire Zygerian campaign demonstrated how thoroughly Dooku had embraced Sith teachings about power and dominion. His actions showed none of the philosophical questioning that had marked his departure from the Jedi Order. Instead, they revealed a man fully committed to the belief that peace through tyranny was preferable to freedom through democracy. The final moments of Count Dooku's life aboard the Invisible Hand crystallized the ultimate truth of Sith philosophy. Betrayal was inevitable. As he engaged in combat with Kenobi and Skywalker above Coruscant, Dooku maintained his characteristic poise, his curved lightsaber moving with the practiced precision of Form 2. Yet something had changed in young Skywalker since their last encounter. The boy's power had grown, fueled by an anger that resonated with the dark side itself. When Dooku subdued Kenobi, he expected his duel with Skywalker to follow familiar patterns. Instead, he found himself facing an opponent transformed by rage and determination. The confined spaces of the Invisible Hand's observation deck became a theater for a duel that would reshape the galaxy. Skywalker's aggressive form battered against Dooku's elegant defenses, each exchange revealing the gap between refined technique and raw power. The moment of his defeat came not as a failure of skill, but as the culmination of years of manipulation. As Skywalker took his hands and held both lightsabers to his throat, Dooku looked to his master, Chancellor Palpatine, expecting the rehearsed rescue. Instead, he saw only cold satisfaction in Sidious's eyes. In that moment, Dooku understood. Every careful plan, every calculated move had led him not to partnership in a new galactic order, but to this, becoming the final sacrifice in Skywalker's journey toward darkness. Palpatine's command to Anakin revealed the full scope of Dooku's miscalculation. He had never been the true apprentice, merely a placeholder until Skywalker could be turned. His aristocratic heritage, political connections, and even his mastery of the dark side had served only to prepare the way for Sidious's chosen one. As Skywalker's blades crossed and ended his life, Dooku's final thoughts were not of anger or betrayal, but of understanding. He had become the very thing he had once despised, a pawn in another's grand design. The departure and eventual fall of Count Dooku left an unforgettable mark on the Jedi Order, but none felt this loss more profoundly than Grand Master Yoda. Their relationship had spanned decades, from Dooku's earliest days as a promising initiate to his ascension as one of the Order's most respected masters. For Yoda, Dooku's turn to darkness represented more than the loss of a former student. It embodied a fundamental challenge to the Jedi's understanding of their own principles. Within the Temple's meditation chambers, Yoda spent countless hours reflecting on Dooku's transformation. The warning signs had been subtle: intellectual dissatisfaction with Jedi doctrine, growing political activism, and an increasing tendency to question the Council's decisions. Yet Yoda had interpreted these traits as the natural expression of Dooku's sophisticated mind, rather than precursors to his fall. This misreading would influence Yoda's approach to future challenges, particularly in his handling of Anakin Skywalker's training. Dooku's betrayal prompted a period of deep introspection within the Jedi Council. The fact that one of their most accomplished masters could not only leave the Order, but embrace the Sith path, raised uncomfortable questions about Jedi training methods. Yoda began emphasizing the importance of emotional awareness alongside traditional teachings about detachment. The Council's discussions increasingly focused on the balance between allowing independent thought and maintaining dedication to Jedi principles. The impact extended beyond philosophical concerns. Yoda's teaching style evolved, incorporating lessons learned from Dooku's fall. When instructing younglings, he paid closer attention to signs of discontent or questioning of Jedi ways. Rather than dismissing such doubts, Yoda engaged with them directly, helping students navigate their uncertainties while maintaining their connection to the light. This approach reflected a painful wisdom, that intellectual brilliance and technical mastery, qualities Dooku had possessed in abundance, needed to be balanced with spiritual groundedness. The shadow of Dooku's fall became particularly evident in Yoda's interactions with the Jedi archives. The removal of the lost 20 planets from the archive system had borne Dooku's signature, a fact that haunted the Grand Master. This incident served as a constant reminder of how a brilliant mind could use its knowledge to subvert rather than serve. In response, Yoda instituted subtle but significant changes to how the Order approached the preservation and sharing of knowledge, always mindful of the delicate balance between wisdom and security. Count Dooku's critiques of both the Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic endure as some of the most incisive analyses of these institutions ever articulated. His arguments, though ultimately twisted by dark side corruption, began from a place of genuine concern and observation. Within the halls of the Jedi Temple, scholars and masters still grapple with the uncomfortable truths he exposed about the Order's relationship with the Republic and its own traditions. The question of Jedi independence from political influence remains particularly relevant. Dooku's assertion that the Order had become too entangled with Senate politics struck at the heart of Jedi identity. His observation that Jedi served as peacekeepers yet increasingly acted as soldiers for the Republic highlighted a fundamental contradiction in their role. These discussions continue to resonate, particularly in examinations of how the Clone Wars ultimately led to the Order's downfall. Dooku's philosophical approach to the Force itself presents an equally compelling subject of study. His journey from Jedi Master to Sith Lord was marked not by sudden corruption, but by a gradual reframing of power and its purpose. His arguments about the nature of the Force challenged traditional Jedi doctrine about the dark side. While the Order taught that the dark side represented corruption of the natural order, Dooku proposed a more nuanced view, that the Force itself was neutral, and that the Jedi's rigid categorization of light and dark limited their understanding of its true nature. The sophistication of Dooku's thinking appears in his writings on Jedi training methods. His criticism that the Order stifled individual growth through dogmatic adherence to ancient traditions forced many to reconsider established practices. Even those who disagreed with his conclusions acknowledged the depth of his analysis. His teachings on lightsaber combat, particularly Form 2, remain studied and respected despite his fall, demonstrating how even a fallen master's wisdom might hold value. Perhaps most intriguing is Dooku's vision of governance. His belief that the Republic's democratic processes had become obstacles to effective rule reflected a philosophy that valued order over freedom. While history proved the tragic consequences of this thinking, his initial diagnosis of the Republic's corruption and inefficiency was largely accurate. This creates an ongoing tension in discussions of his legacy. How could someone be so right about the problems yet so wrong about the solutions? Count Dooku's management of his homeworld, Serenno, revealed the complex intersection of his aristocratic heritage and Separatist leadership. The ancient towers of House Dooku became more than symbols of nobility. They transformed into vital command centers for the Confederacy. Yet Dooku maintained Serenno's independence from direct Separatist control, ensuring his ancestral world remained a sovereign power rather than merely another member state. Within Sereno's ornate palace halls, Dooku established a careful balance between tradition and military necessity. The planet's considerable wealth, accumulated over generations of aristocratic rule, was strategically channeled into Separatist operations. However, he maintained the appearance of Sereno's neutrality, presenting his world as a diplomatic haven rather than a military stronghold. This deception allowed him to host crucial meetings with potential Separatist allies while avoiding Republic scrutiny. Dooku's governance of Serenyo demonstrated his talent for resource management. The planet's advanced manufacturing sectors were subtly retooled to support the war effort without disrupting civilian life. Local industries produced everything from military-grade communications equipment to specialized parts for Separatist warships, all under the guise of normal commercial operations. The planet's vast forests provided rare materials for advanced weapons development, while its ancient vaults contained wealth that funded countless covert operations. The Count's relationship with Sereno's other noble houses showcased his political mastery. Rather than demanding their loyalty, he offered them carefully calculated privileges within the new Separatist order. Each house received enough benefit to ensure their cooperation, yet never enough power to challenge his authority. Through regular gatherings at his palace, Dooku maintained the illusion of collective governance while quietly centralizing control under his leadership. This system would later serve as a model for how he envisioned governing the entire Confederacy. The true genius of Dooku's Sereno operations lay in their sustainability. While other Separatist worlds strained under the burdens of war, Sereno prospered. Its economy remained stable, its defenses strong, and its population largely supportive of their leaders' galactic ambitions. This success story became a powerful recruitment tool, showing potential allies that separation from the Republic could lead to prosperity rather than chaos. Beyond the official Separatist intelligence apparatus, Count Dooku cultivated a sophisticated personal network of spies and informants that extended throughout both Republic and Separatist space. This shadow organization operated independently from the Confederacy's regular intelligence services, answering exclusively to Dooku himself. Unlike the more militant Separatist spy networks, Dooku's agents were chosen for their subtlety and ability to move undetected through high society. The network's foundation rested on Dooku's extensive connections from his time as a Jedi Master. Former diplomatic contacts, disillusioned Republic officials, and even some members of noble houses were carefully recruited and positioned throughout key systems. These agents were rarely traditional spies. Instead, they were respected members of their communities who shared Dooku's vision of galactic reform or stood to benefit from his promised new order. Within the Senate itself, Dooku maintained a web of informants that extended beyond mere political allegiance to the Separatist cause. These individuals provided valuable intelligence about Republic military movements and political decisions, often without realizing the full scope of their contribution. The Count's aristocratic background proved invaluable here, as he understood how to leverage social obligations and personal favors without arousing suspicion. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Dooku's intelligence network was its integration with high culture. Art dealers, museum curators, and cultural attachés served as perfect covers for his agents. These positions allowed them to travel freely between Republic and Separatist space under the pretext of managing cultural exchanges or acquiring artifacts. The network's communications often utilized sophisticated encryption methods hidden within legitimate art transactions or cultural documents. The operations command structure reflected Dooku's preference for personal control. Each cell operated independently, with information flowing through carefully chosen intermediaries before reaching him. This compartmentalization ensured that the capture of one agent couldn't compromise the entire network. Even his master, Darth Sidious, remained unaware of the full extent of this personal intelligence apparatus, a fact that demonstrated Dooku's understanding of the Sith tendency toward betrayal. Count Dooku's cultivation of a sophisticated public image went far beyond mere political necessity. His patronage of the arts served as both a continuation of his aristocratic heritage and a careful tool of influence. The vast collections housed within his Sereno Palace ranged from ancient Force-sensitive artifacts to contemporary masterpieces, each piece selected not only for its artistic merit, but also for the message it conveyed about its owner's refinement and wisdom. His support of artists throughout both Republic and Separatist space maintained an appearance of cultural sophistication, even as war raged across the galaxy. Dooku commissioned works that subtly reinforced his political message, funding artists who portrayed the Republic's decay or celebrated the independence movements of various systems. These pieces found homes in galleries and museums across the galaxy, their political undertones masked by their artistic merit. The Count's personal library became legendary among scholars and collectors. Ancient texts and rare manuscripts filled its shelves, many acquired during his years as a Jedi Master. However, the collection served a deeper purpose than mere scholarly pursuit. Hidden among historical treatises and philosophical works were Sith texts and dark side artifacts, their presence concealed by the sheer volume of legitimate academic materials surrounding them. Dooku's cultural soirees brought together artists, scholars, and potential political allies in an atmosphere of refined intellectual discourse. These gatherings served multiple purposes. They maintained his image as a cultured aristocrat, provided cover for clandestine meetings, and allowed him to assess potential recruits to his cause. The events became known for their stimulating discussions of art, philosophy, and politics, carefully steered to highlight the failings of the Republic system. As war approached its climax, these cultural pursuits took on a final, tragic dimension. Much of Dooku's collection would outlive him, scattered across the galaxy as testament to a man who balanced ruthless ambition with genuine appreciation for civilization's finest achievements. Throughout his years as both Jedi Master and Sith Lord, Count Dooku established a network of secret facilities that reflected the duality of his nature. These hidden sanctuaries ranged from meditation chambers deep within abandoned temples to fortified compounds on remote worlds. Each location was chosen with characteristic precision, often situated at sites strong with the Force or holding strategic value within ancient hyperspace routes. Within the depths of Sereno's mountain ranges, Dooku constructed his primary sanctuary. This facility combined Sith architecture with advanced security systems, creating a space where he could fully embrace dark side teachings away from prying eyes. The chamber's design incorporated elements from ancient Sith temples, their geometric patterns focusing and amplifying dark side energies. Here, he would spend hours in meditation, delving deeper into forbidden knowledge while maintaining the composure that set him apart from other dark side adherents. Dooku's most closely guarded sanctuaries contained vast repositories of both Jedi and Sith knowledge. These archives held information deemed too dangerous for even the Jedi Temple's restricted vaults. In these secret places, he stored not only ancient holocrons and artifacts, but also detailed contingency plans, private correspondence, and evidence of operations unknown even to his Separatist allies. Each facility was protected by layers of security, from traditional guards to force-based defenses that could be navigated only by those trained in specific techniques. The final sanctuary, never fully completed, lay hidden beneath Raxus's capital city. This facility was intended to serve as a secure command center from which Dooku could guide the Separatist movement to ultimate victory. Its existence remained unknown to all but a handful of his most trusted agents, its construction disguised as municipal improvements. Like so many of his careful preparations, this sanctuary would remain unfinished, its purpose unfulfilled following his death aboard the Invisible Hand. These hidden retreats stand as testament to Count Dooku's methodical nature and grandiose ambitions, silent monuments to a man who sought to reshape the galaxy through a combination of ancient wisdom and calculated control.